a very cold and frosty mid-January morning. I'm off to meet a man who has a growing obsession with camping in a tent in conditions just like this, and even colder. And what's more, he reckons his tent is more comfortable than a camper van.
John D. Burns is an Inverness-based writer and mountaineer, and I've come here to meet him at Creag National Nature Reserve to talk to him about his latest book. But before I do that, I want to get settled in a bit and then try and have a wee bit of a walk.
Now, where I've arranged to meet John tonight has given me a wee bit of a problem. It's very close to a road, about, 30-40 metres from a road, and that might or might not be a problem when I'm trying to get to sleep tonight. I can hear the traffic quite loudly as it passes by, and even though this camper van is pretty well insulated, and there's nothing worse than trying to get to sleep, and every so often you get the shoo of cars passing, and not only cars, but it's a fairly busy road. It's the kind of main Aviemore to Fort William road, so you get timber lorries and trucks and goodness knows what. But I think I have the answer, and this is it. These earplugs. This could well be what I'm looking for. They're ideal for camping. I've used earplugs a lot when I've been camping, because often the wind batters the tent, and it flaps, and you can hear the noise of the wind in the trees, and quite often there's a lot of sounds. One of the worst ones is camping next to a stream where the water runs all night and makes you want to go for a pee every 10 minutes. So earplugs are great. I've used them a lot in tents. They're fantastic. These are particularly good ones, and I think tonight John's going to be sleeping in his hot tent. I'm going to be sleeping in the camper van. I'm not going to sleep in the hot tent with him, because he tells me that he's the worst snorer in the Scottish Highlands. So I'm going to take myself off and sleep in the camper van tonight, and I'm going to try these and see if I get a decent night's sleep away from the traffic noise, thanks to these earplugs.
Good. The tent man, the hot tent man. Welcome to Meagaidh.
You've always been known as a bothy man. You've written books about bothy. What turned you into a camper?
Oh, well, it was all to do with COVID and the pandemic, really. As you know, bothies were closed for quite a long time, and sort of even when they opened up, there was a different kind of risk, I suppose, sitting in a confined space with a lot of people you didn't know. So I started to look for an alternative to bothies, and I found I discovered hot tenting.
Is that the sort of technical name of a tent like this, a hot tent?
Yeah, a hot tent is basically a tent with a stove, and they come in all sorts of varieties. But that's fundamentally what what a hot tent is.
Yeah. You say you discovered a hot tent. How did you discover it? Because it's not the sort of thing you see in campsites and whatnot.
You don't see them very often in campsites, I'll give in. But in fact, I experimented with various kind of lightweight tents, nylon tents and large family tents, and I couldn't find one that really would cope with the sort of the rigours of the Scottish winter, really. And I was wandering through a campsite in Gairloch when I noticed a little wisp of smoke coming out of a chimney out of a tent. And as soon as I saw it, really, this conical tent with a little chimney poking out the top and smoke drifting into the sky, I thought, that's what I need. And that's really how I almost stumbled across a hot tent, really.
And did you get chatting to people who were using that tent? I mean, were they?
Yes, there were a couple about my age, perhaps a little bit older, and there were hot tenting enthusiasts, if such a thing exists, you know. And they'd spent over 500 nights in this tent, they told me, and they had it beautifully, immaculately rigged and set up, and they'd been north of the Arctic Circle. And to be quite honest, I sort of quizzed them. I thought, well, this is my chance to find out whether these tents work in Scottish conditions. So I asked them what they were like in wind and rain and snow. And by the end of the conversation, I was more than convinced that actually this was the tent that I needed, that was my, if you like, my mobile bothy.
Yeah, yeah. You won't get this tent and a stove into a rucksack, though.
No, well, you might, but you wouldn't be able to lift it. No, this is really, it's portable to the extent that if you had a canoe, or what I do is I can pull it around in a little a garden cart, things like that. You could move it a short distance from the road. It's a kind of car camping, but in Scotland, as you know, if you go far enough, some of our roads are very remote. So in fact, you can get to quite remote places, and you've only got to get really a few hundred yards from the road, and you're on your own in a lot of places.
Mm. Tell me about your first experience with the tent when you got this, and it came as a big roll of canvas. How did you cope with it?
Very badly at first, really. I was quite concerned, to be honest, because I've had experience of camping over many years, and in my experience, it's a good idea to keep tents and fire well apart. But this was a tent that had a stove, so I actually went back to Gairloch, but this time I think it was January. Different story then, and I set up the tent. Now, I wasn't sure, to be honest, whether I'd done it right, and I was very apprehensive when I actually lit the stove, because once you light the stove in a hot tent, that's it. There's no off switch, and obviously I was quite concerned that if I'd got the aperture for where the chimney emerges from the tent, if I didn't get that right, I could be about to burn the whole thing down. But I lit it, and I certainly found out where the word hot tent came from. The heat was unbelievable, and of course I didn't know there are vents in this tent, but I didn't know how to work them. And it settled down. I was still alive. The tent didn't catch fire, and then I remember I was sitting in my t-shirt, and I went outside to get another book, and it was quite dramatic. Everywhere around me was frozen solid and glittering with hoarfrost, and I realised I was very comfortable in the wee tent. So this was the future for me, you know.
Was it a big eye opener for you?
Yeah, because this is the hot tent is a very different kind of tent. You know, for years I'd spent time, particularly when I was younger, in backpacking tents, lightweight tents that you could carry, you could put in the bottom of your rucksack and carry somewhere. I'd spent many hours at times shivering in Scottish winters, and suddenly this tent was warm and almost indestructible, and gave me a kind of a base camp where I could camp. And one of the things it's also allowed me to do is I can go to a lot of different places that I didn't explore before. you tend to get quite habit formed, I suppose, in the hills. You know, you'll tend to go to the same place that you know, or but there are lots of other places that and get very little traffic, and so I've started to. I think it's enabled me to see a different aspect of the Highlands, one that I wouldn't have seen before. So it's been quite a big change, really.
And just as you're talking there, this headline that's flashed in front of my brain there, it says John burns on a hot tent.
Yeah, well, I have burnt myself a few times.
Oh dear. So you got the tent and you drive about, you find somewhere to park, you haul everything in your little garden trolley, you set things up. Do you tend to just have one night at a time, or I mean watching you put the tent up, there's quite a lot to it.
There is quite a lot. It's you know, I tend to like a fair bit of luxury with my tent. So there's you know, I have a decent chair to sit in, and carpet the floors, and I've got my little oil lamps and all that sort of stuff.
You don't have any reindeer hides yet, though.
I've no reindeer hides, but I'm if you could manage to hit one on the way home in the car, I wouldn't mind one.
Yeah.
So I tend to stay 2 or 3 nights in one place. I tend to pick the spots fairly carefully as well. I think it's really important if you're putting a tent up that you kind of feel comfortable with it. It's a bit like buying a house. You wouldn't buy a house somewhere that you didn't feel comfortable with. So I always try to camp somewhere that is off the beaten track, probably not overlooked by houses, not in near anybody, not interfering with anybody really. Somewhere you can be sort of peaceful and quiet.
Of course, our access legislation must make it a lot easier just to put up a tent somewhere, because of course you can do that legally.
Yeah, you can in Scotland. Now, that's a very important point. Yeah. But at the same time, I think it's you know, as you know, our countryside's under quite a lot of pressure. So I'm always very careful again, and I think it's really important to follow the kind of principles of leave no trace, which means that, you know, when I take a pride really when I take away my tent, all there is a flattened piece of grass. I don't leave any litter. I don't have a campfire. I have a stove, but the stove doesn't make any mark. So I think that we have to protect our access rights as well by being responsible with them. So although this is a kind of car camping in a way, and car camping has a very bad reputation, undeservedly I think, but certain areas and certain places have been put under a lot of pressure. So I try and be considerate when I do it, because, you know, if we want to preserve these rights, it's really important that we're considerate with them.
I have a feeling when I come in here that you've kind of gone right back in time. Is there an element of nostalgia with this kind of camping? Absolutely there is. You know,
you get in here and this is an old-fashioned tent. You know, the walls are canvas, it's heated by wood, it's lit by paraffin stoves. You know, one of the things I always imagine is if the early polar explorers, people like Shackleton, people like Scott and Adamson, if they were to walk through the flap of my tent right now, they would sit down and the place would be totally familiar to them. There wouldn't be anything that they would think, well, what's that? You know, it does go back to a simpler way of life as well, I think. I think that's that. You know, I don't like to take all the accoutrements of modern living with me, and it's the atmosphere of the place which is as important. You know, this tent is an old-fashioned tent in many ways, as you've said. It's kind of based on the tents that were used by the Safir nomadic people who were you know, in Scandinavia in the far north, who needed a tent that was robust, that they could heat, and that was portable. And so this is essentially the same design as that. You know, one of the things that's happened over the years, as you say, the trend certainly in Britain in terms of tents has been to go to for the ultra lightweight, and that really is, I think, based on a sort of an American philosophy of how you would camp. But one of the things about the American climate is that's a continental climate. So the Americans enjoy a much drier, colder climate than we do. This tent is more designed for a Scandinavian climate, which can be wetter, colder maybe, a bit windier. And so it actually suits British conditions better.
Tell me how it copes in the wind. Have you had it in a real stormy night?
I've not had it in a full-blown gale yet. I'm sure that'll happen. This is the tent is essentially conical, and that actually is the best shape of any tent to withstand the wind. It's a bit like a boxer. When the wind presses against one side of it, it kind of rolls and sheds the wind. It's because it's canvas. It's a bit quieter than a nylon tent. Nylon tents in the wind tend to be fairly noisy, as I'm sure you know. Any tent will rock and blow around in the wind. There's no two ways about that. But it's designed to cope with winds up to 60 miles an hour. And I personally don't intend to camp any windier than that, you know.
And you keep the stove burning when you sleep at night?
No, I don't tend to do that. I'll stoke the stove up, and it probably takes about an hour and a half to cool down, you know, before the fire goes completely out. But I use, you know, I have a good sleeping bag, and it gets cold in here at night. If you're camping in any kind of conditions, you're going to have to be prepared now and again to be a bit cold. But if you've got a good sleeping bag, to be honest, I don't find that a problem. And if I get up in the morning and I'm feeling a bit chilly, I can just light the fire, light the stove, and within 5-10 minutes you're warm as toast.
Okay, let's have a look at the nitty-gritty of finance. I guess this isn't a cheap setup.
No, as far as tents go, this is definitely not cheap. I've probably spent about £3,000 on the tent, on the stove, and on all the little bits and pieces of equipment to keep me comfortable. You know,
cheaper than a campervan.
But a lot cheaper than a campervan. That wouldn't buy the kitchen in a campervan, would it?
No.
So there you go.
Yeah.
So if you compare it with a campervan, then it's pretty cheap. And also, obviously, a tent like this, unlike a lot of lightweight tents, is very durable. I would expect this tent to easily last 20 years.
So come on then, give me some of the advantages of a tent like this over a campervan.
Oh, well, I'm talking to a campervan enthusiast here. I feel that the major advantage of this over a campervan that we've kind of already touched on, really, is more the atmosphere of it. I feel that this tent is, it's more in sympathy with the landscape. It's a little canvas cone just sits there and is fairly unobtrusive, in my opinion. Whereas a campervan brings with it all the modern conveniences, but all the complexities of modern life as well. And I think the difference is not so much in how effective they are; it's in what suits you personally, what is right for you. Not everybody would like a hot tent, I'm sure. You know, not everybody wants to sleep on the floor and wake up in sub-zero temperatures. You've got to be able to do that. But at the same time, I can go to places where you couldn't park, or I can get off the road. I can get away from the tarmac, even if it's only a few hundred yards. And I think there's a difference in that from just parking up, even if you're in a remote spot in a campervan.
So what are your aspirations as a hot tent camper? How do you see this new interest evolving?
I'd like to take this tent to different places. I'd like to explore, to take it to Norway and places like that. I'd like to if I could, to experience what it's like to hot tent in Alaska, things like that. It's a small boy's fascination with camping in dens, really.
Well, we've had a grand night in the hot tent, if you pardon the expression, and it's time to go to bed now, so I'm just going to pop in the earplugs, and I'm hoping for a nice quiet night, and I think we'll probably get that. And I bid you all good night, and we'll see you in the morning. Good morning. Let me see if I can find a light. Oh, that's better. Oh God, it's been a cold night. I think at the moment in here it's 1 degree inside the van. Yeah, well, I can't hear very well. That's better. A cold night, but a quiet night. These little earplugs by this company called Ear Protect, and they've been fantastic. I didn't hear a sound of anything all night long. I didn't hear the cars passing or the trucks passing. They really did their job, so hey, that's a winner. Absolutely delighted. They're not very expensive. I'll put all the details down below, and you can have a look for yourself. But if you suffer from waking up during the night because of sounds outside, or if you're parked somewhere near where there's a road where there's a lot of traffic noise, or if it's very, very windy and you've got a pop top, for example, and the wind's kind of battering it, a pair of these little earplugs will sort you out. And they're really good. They come in 2 sizes, and so you can get a size that actually fits. And these little ear wings, these little kind of add-on bits at the end, these ear wings, actually just fit inside your ear there and prevent them falling out during the night. I've had so many earplugs in the past which fall out during the night, and you spend ages in your bed in the morning trying to find them. But these have been absolutely fantastic, so highly recommended. And as I say, I'll put all the details down below. Well, that was an interesting night with John in his hot tent, and I can understand now why they call it a hot tent. It's quite amazing. You're standing outside in sub-zero temperatures, and you just go under that flap, and it's a whole new world. It's lovely and warm and cosy, and there's kind of something nice about sitting in there and having a chat, and you get the smell of wood smoke, the smell of the paraffin lights, and that nice ambience that those kind of lights produce. So very, very pleasant, very nice. Would I swap my camper van for a hot tent? Probably not. I quite like the comforts of my camper van now. I don't think you can really compare the two, but certainly once you're in there, once it's erected and you're in there, you've got that little stove going. As John says, it takes you back to another era, the era of Scott and Shackleton and these polar explorers, something very special. But it was a good night, it was a good experience. John's written a book about it, Hot Tent Diaries, and I'll put the details of that down below, and where you can get a hold of it. It's well worth reading. It's full of his stories of using the hot tent and using the tent in various parts of the Highlands. So, and a lot of good practical advice too about using a hot tent, things that he's learned through his own experience. So I'll put all of that down below here, and I'll also give mention of the earplugs that I used last night. I was really very, very impressed by those, and I think those earplugs will now be a part of my camper van kit, just in the off chance that I have to park up somewhere that's noisy. So that's it. that's it for this video. If you've enjoyed this video, can I encourage you to subscribe to the channel? It really does help a lot. Please comment in the comments down below. It's good to have interaction with people who watch these videos, and we can learn a lot from each other. So, and that's it. And if you like it, yeah, just press that wee like box. That helps a lot too. And that's it until the next one. So just be careful out there. It's still winter. Enjoy your camper van, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.